Hi. Nice to see you all on Tuesday morning after Monday night. I'm Rosie, and I work on the Radiodays team, and I was at Radiodays Asia this year, and that's where I first met KJ. But what was really interesting for me is that I also run like the volunteers, the young people that want some experience in media and want to do blogging and stuff like that. And I said to them, you know, what are you excited about seeing here at Radiodays Asia? And all of them said, I want to see KJ. Do you think I can have a selfie with him? And I couldn't stop laughing because I said, I don't know any politician in the UK that would want to, that like 18, 20-year-olds would want to have their photograph taken with, but you are a rock star in Malaysia, right?
In Malaysia, clearly, not here.
But you've got a super interesting story.
Thank you,
A
Rosie.
really interesting
Thank you.
story. And actually, you've got a presentation you're going to do. I'm going to ask some questions, but I'm going to keep my eye on you guys as well. So if you've got questions, then please just put your hand up or and wave, because the lights are quite bright, actually, aren't they? So wave, and we'll if we could get a microphone and see if you've got a question, ask it as we go along. But there will be time for questions at the end as well. So over to you.
Thank you, Rosie, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to Radiodays Europe. This was following on from our chat in Asia. Happy to be here. I want to tell you a story this morning about how podcasting and broadcasting saved me. I don't know what you do with discarded politicians in Europe. I suspect you let them fade away, and they just sink into obscurity. Now, I was in my mid-40s when this story, which I'm about to tell you, happened to me. I did not want to go gentle into the good night. I thought I had something left to say, and I found my voice through podcasting and broadcasting. I don't know whether other politicians in Europe can do this, or whether they will be allowed to do this, but this was my story. In 2021, at the height of COVID and the pandemic, I was the health minister of Malaysia. So I was in the eye of the storm. I had almost daily press conferences. I was tasked with leading my country out of the pandemic. And it wasn't an easy job, but it was a high-profile job. I think we did okay. Malaysia had one of the top 10 fastest vaccination rates in the world. It was highly stressful, but highly rewarding. And I felt that I was going somewhere in my career. I felt good with myself. I thought we'd done a pretty good job. But of course, I broke the one cardinal rule that politicians should observe, which is to not be anything more than mediocre. Because once you do that, you attract very, very unwanted attention, especially from people on your own side. So what happened after we handled COVID, we got out of the pandemic, we had an election, general election. And at that point in time, I had served in 3 different ministries. I was Minister of Youth and Sports, I was Science Minister, and finally I was Health Minister. I was a 3-time Member of Parliament. I defended my constituency and my traditional seat twice, won first time and defended it twice with decent majorities, and it was considered a relatively safe seat. But because of what happened and because of unwanted attention, I was sent at the last hour to a different constituency. So 3 days before nomination day, so in elections, nomination days when everything starts, I was sent to a seat which I had no ties to. I wasn't from there. And the best part of it was a seat in which the opposing party, not my party, but the opposing party, had won the last 4 elections, and the last elections they had won with a majority of almost 30,000 votes. But I was sent there, and I knew that it was a suicide mission. I knew that it was somewhere that I was sent to die, simply because rivals didn't want me to progress in my career. But
And how did that feel? Like you knew you were going.
I knew I was going, Rosie, but I felt that it was a challenge. I didn't want to seem to be someone who wasn't a team player. I thought, okay, if there's somebody who could probably do well in a tough seat, I put my hand up.
Yeah.
But I knew the ulterior motive was to kill me. So
Right.
I went anyway. And I managed to, so it was mission impossible, but I managed to turn around the situation. So before I went, the last elections, we lost by 26,000. I brought that down to about 2,000, but I still lost. And I faced my first loss in this series of losses. And after the loss, I, of course, attributed the loss not just to myself. Of course, the first thing that you should do is take accountability for yourself. But I also said that it was because we had to carry an extremely unpopular party leader who was disliked by the public. And of course, he wasn't happy about that. And the second loss came very quickly after I lost in the general election, and I was expelled from my party. So I was 47 years old. I was health minister, the height of COVID, successfully brought the country out of the pandemic. And suddenly, almost overnight, within 2 months, I found myself out of politics, something that I had been doing for 20 years, something that I had liked doing. And frankly, I probably didn't know what to do next, or I wouldn't have known anything else other than politics, having been in politics for the last 15 to 20 years. So I had a long introspective moment about what do I do and what can I do? And I thought, well, one, I have a lot of things to say and get off my chest. I had to respond to what happened to me. And I remember I was running one day whilst being unemployed, and I stumbled across a podcast called The Rest is Politics. This is a podcast from the UK that Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, again, two politicians or political aid in the politicians. Rory was expelled by his party. Alistair was expelled by the Labour Party. And I thought, wow, you know,
I can do this.
Why don't I do this?
Yeah.
Why don't I do this? So I had a friend who was expelled by the same party as well. And I said to him, hey, listen to The Rest is Politics. These are clearly two guys who are expelled by their parties, who initially thought they didn't know what to do after politics, but have clearly carved out a new career in broadcasting and writing and now in podcasting. So we set up a podcast. That was the picture of our first ever recording. So nothing fancy, just one camera, the two of us, two microphones on a sofa. And we said to ourselves, look, you know, one big problem that we had in politics was we had to toe the party line, and we had to observe the party whip. And we were very much outliers in our party. We were seen to be a bit too liberal, a bit too progressive. Our party is conservative, very, very set in its ways. And we had to observe the party line, and we had to be team players. And that was extremely frustrating. It's extremely frustrating because we're mavericks. We want to make sure that we push the envelope. We want to make sure that we change the party as much as we conform to its traditional values and traditional ideology and philosophy. Well, I said to him, this is our time to be absolutely unencumbered and unrestrained. Because if you want a second act in politics, you have to make sure that that second act is something that you can live with.
Yes.
The first act is definitely not something you can live with, because you're trying to be someone else. You're trying to fit into your party. You're trying to fit into your ideology. You're trying to fit into your team.
And so do you feel that the podcast is kind of giving you the ability to find your identity and what you stand for?
Well, I mean, I don't know about other podcasters, but for me, it was all about finding our voice or regaining our voice. We knew the voice was always there, but we knew that voice had to be submerged. We knew that voice had to be tempered. We knew that voice had to be tamed. But this was the time for us to let loose.
Yeah.
Because this was our podcast. We're not regulated. We're not governed by producers. I mean, we are our own producers. And it's what we want to write. And it's what we want to say. And it's what we want to present. So that's how we got onto the journey of coming up with a podcast. And we said, we promised ourselves, we said this time around, if it ever leads us to going back into politics one day, let this be what we present ourselves to the people.
Yes.
Unrestrained, unencumbered. Of course, you need party discipline. Of course, you need some measure of filter when you're up there as a politician, but not to the extent that you've lost yourself.
And I think that's interesting, listening to the podcast, which I have done quite a lot, but I told you this morning, didn't I, that I stopped because it completely messed up the algorithms of what was suggested to me. And I can only understand bits of it. I don't speak Malay, but you get on really well. I can hear, I can obviously understand the English bits, which is interesting in itself as well. You slip in and out of English and Malay. And I said to you, is that what a lot of people do?
So for many countries, I come from Malaysia in Southeast Asia, which is between Thailand and Singapore. So for many countries in which English is a second language, naturally, organically, every day, you slip into both. I speak Malay, that's our national language, and we slip into English. And that's the same in India, the Indian market. You see a lot of Bollywood people, they speak Hindi, they slip into English.
And
it's the same.
Do people like that? Is it?
Well, of course, the language purists, they complain. They put down, they write in the comments saying, please speak in the national language.
Right.
But we're not regulated. That's the best part of podcasts. So, I mean, I'll explain that I have two hats right now. I hedge between podcasting and radio, which is something, I think, an interesting sharing that I wanted to convey to you this morning. But because it's unrestrained, because it's unregulated, you don't have to conform to regulatory strictures, which are a little bit more strict, and you can just be natural. And I find that that's been part of the secret of our success. And so we started this to let off steam. We started it off to complain and to react against the party leadership, to criticize the party leadership. And then we thought, no, it can be something more than that. It can be something a bit more dignified. It can be more than just two guys who've lost their place in the party, who've been expelled by their party, who've been cast out. And because, Rosie, if we continue to do that, day in, day out, it's going to be really bitter and salty.
And also, you want your image to be one of change and positivity, right?
Yes,
Not of like, well, this happened to me and it was awful. Right.
So for 1 month, it was bitter. And then we decided to turn things around. I mean, let me explain a bit about the format of the podcast. We record 2 podcasts a week. It's about 1 to 1.5 hours. So it's not short form, it's long form. And this was another punt that we made. We made a punt saying that, look, we have to rise against the short formism of politics. The short formism is the headlines, the sound bites, the TikTok videos, and as much as that's prevalent, and we're not saying that that's good or bad, there's no judgment call against that, but there has to be the rise and the re-emergence of the long form. Because if there's no re-emergence of the long form, and everything is bite-sized short form in political discourse, then I fear the quality of that discourse over time deteriorates. Of course, we do short form as well. We take whatever's in our podcast, we turn it into TikTok videos, we turn it into Instagram reels. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's rooted in a long form, which has a beginning, an argument, and a conclusion.
Yeah, right. The short form, what we call promos, right? They're to get people to listen to the longer ones. But how much prep do you do? Do you do any, or do you just walk in and it's
For the podcast?
Yeah.
We do a lot of prep. So what started off as a side hustle has pretty much become a main event right now. Because when we walk in twice a week into a recording of 1 and 1.5 hours, you can't just be talking crap. It's impossible. And your audience and your listeners will call you out. So there's a tremendous amount of work that you need to do. I was lucky because I studied politics and economics at university, which meant I didn't study anything apart from just being able to mug up for an hour and just regurgitate something and BS my way through tutorials. So it's perfect setup and training for a podcaster and a broadcaster. And it's been wonderful. But the preparation is everything. And the other secret is that we prepare separately. We don't discuss before. Because you lose the spontaneity. You lose the chemistry. So I don't know what he's going to say. He doesn't know what I'm going to say. But we have the same hymn sheet as in the same research.
But
That's it.
Do you like each other?
Sometimes. Sometimes. I mean, I think podcast, broadcast dynamics, whether it's in radio, whether it's in podcast, if you ask everyone who's involved with somebody else,
Yeah.
the truth must be sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you're in each other's faces all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it's radio, whether it's podcasting about issues, about very trite things, about entertaining things, and you're not going to get it right all the time.
No.
Yeah.
No. And also from, arguments and from disagreements, that's where a lot of the creativity comes.
Sure, absolutely. And that tension has to continue to be nurtured and left as it is.
Yeah.
And so we started the podcast, and we didn't know where it was going to go, and before long, so 33 million views on YouTube to date. We just celebrated our first year anniversary. We're regularly #1 on Spotify in Malaysia. We operate across different platforms. And I just wanted to weigh in on the debate about video and audio. So Malaysia is as you know, Rosie, it's a very visual culture. So we get more views on YouTube than we get listeners on Spotify and Apple Music or wherever we get your podcast from. And that's because people love to see the nonverbal communication. They want to see the body language. They want to see my facial expression. They want to see us interact in the studio. So we've come to accept the fact that podcasts are no longer audio, and that's here to stay. And I think whatever I've listened here in Radio Days Europe and Radio Days Asia, most podcasts have introduced some element of video because that is more visceral, that allows for people to appreciate the message even more. So video has been very important to us.
Yeah, it has. And in fact, I really enjoyed watching on YouTube because obviously, as previously mentioned, I only understand a little bit. So it is really nice to pick up on those nonverbal cues. You're right. Yeah.
So we've done pretty well, and we're very thankful for this. As a result of what we've done, other politicians have set up podcasts. Podcasts are growing exponentially in Malaysia and in Southeast Asia right now. Not entirely due to us, but of course we were pioneers in terms of political podcasts, and podcasts have existed in Malaysia for many, many years before us. And I don't know if you can see this, but one thing that has been extremely, extremely rewarding and important to me is affecting the narrative from outside. I was in politics for the last 20 years. These decisions were made in a room in cabinet where I was a member. And I felt that when I was outside, perhaps the worst thing that I would feel was this despondency of not being part of it, this fear of missing out, of big decisions. And I thought, there must be a way of affecting change from the outside. And not everyone can do this. I'm very thankful because I'm in a privileged position of being somebody who has been in cabinet, a minister. So whatever we say has that added weight, added gravitas, added advantage of maybe pushing the needle or moving the needle on some issues.
But it's really interesting because as a politician, you kind of need connection. But as a broadcaster, as a podcaster, you're finding that connection. People do connect with you, don't they?
That's a wonderful point. Now, I'll come to that in a slide later. So we thought, initially we were dismissed. The first couple of months, people said, okay, bunch of losers, they lost in the elections, they've been cast out of their parties, no one's going to listen to them, forget about them, a bunch of has-beens, a bunch of never-was. But we started affecting change. We started controlling the narrative. So about 8 months into the new government, it was just lackluster, not going anywhere. They were in the doldrums. So we started calling for a cabinet reshuffle. We were one of the first to start calling for a cabinet reshuffle until the Prime Minister was pressured and there was a cabinet reshuffle. Prime Minister decided when he became Prime Minister to become the Finance Minister as well. So it was Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is not a great practice, not best practice. And we called on the fact that he needed somebody else. You can't possibly do both jobs at the same time. And that happened. And we wanted to reform pensions, and the government announced a few months later that they want reform pensions. I'm not saying that it's because of us, but I'm saying that we're part of the conversation.
Yes.
And that's meaningful for people who run podcasts on current affairs. I was told somewhere, Rosie, that 80%, 85% of new podcasts die. and they
Yeah.
go to the podcast graveyard.
Yeah.
When you can't get traction, that's when you head to the graveyard of podcasts. So again, I'm not saying that the success is because I was an ex-minister, but you have to look for that traction and try to show that the podcast is beyond discussion, affecting change, especially if you're doing political podcasts and podcasts on social issues.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is the other.
Right.
So this is love and hate. This is what Rosie mentioned just now. I just wanted to contextualize this. The picture on the right was a picture edited that was posted on social media when I was a minister. And that was posted by a very, very vociferous, vocal, anti-vax group in Malaysia when I was health minister, bringing vaccine mandates to the country, making sure everyone is vaccinated. And of course, to them, I was the Antichrist. The picture on the left is me as a radio presenter and a podcaster recently, a bit more well received by the public. And I can't tell you, Rosie, the number of people who come up to me and said, I hated you as a politician, but I don't mind you as a podcaster. I quite like you as a radio presenter.
But I find these reactions interesting. So if you're in the public eye, you get love and hate. I've been on air, you get people say things and you have to kind of suck it up and go, okay, they're not my family, so I don't really care what they think about me. They're not my friends, they don't know me. And then you kind of, something happens in your brain once you do that and you turn it round and think, that took you a really long time to make that, right? Yeah. So you must care. And I think that's the thing that we've been talking about, you and I, in prep for this, is that your listeners, your viewers, have got this connection with you. They care. They care enough to put something horrible up. They care enough to put something nice up. But it's all caring enough, isn't it? And you have to look at it as a positive.
Yeah, but I tell you, the caring on the left is better than the caring on the right.
Yeah, true.
I think that there's another reason to this, is because when somebody who's an ex-politician, obviously on some form of pedestal, a pedestal where you are either respected, adulated, or where people throw things at you, but still nonetheless on a pedestal, when you decide not to go quietly into that good night, but still stay in the public eye, you have to think to yourself, how am I going to present myself in that public eye? Mm-hmm. Do I still want that deference of being the honorable politician, minister, or do I do something else? And I think he's in the crowd. My friend Niall from Ireland said to me yesterday, in radio, there's no dignity. In podcasting and radio, there's no dignity, and I'll explain why later. It's because I went from being a minister wearing a suit to having minders around me, to having personal protection next to me, having that gap with people, to becoming this guy on radio doing TikTok dances, absolutely no dignity.
Yeah.
And people said, this is it. This is the authenticity that we want.
And also, I think people love someone that's something bad's happened to them, and then the story is a positive one afterwards.
Well, we hope that's the arc that's about to take place.
It keeps going, right?
Yeah. So this is the personal side of how podcasting and broadcasting has been able to connect with people in a way that I think I wasn't able to do when I was a politician. And the other thing that we've discovered is content first, money second. We didn't know that this podcast was going to make money. My partner Cheryl and I both run the podcast. We just wanted to weigh in on the issues of the day, be smart, encourage other people to be smart about things, educate people about the issues, educate ourselves about the issues. And we just wanted to focus on the craft and the content. And we didn't really think that people wanted to advertise with us. And about 7-8 months in, we got our first cold call from someone saying that, hey, we do this local product. I think it was a food stuff. Do you mind having it on your table?
And did that add an element of validation as soon as you had brands that wanted to be associated with you, or did it make you feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that? What reaction did you have?
No. I have no qualms about being a corporate sellout. I mean, this is all about money. This is, if you're running a podcast, you're bootstrapping a podcast, and I'll explain later that I run the podcast, but I'm also part of a bigger traditional media empire, which is well-funded and well-sponsored. But if you're bootstrapping your podcast, you have no qualms about corporate sellout. You put anything on your table.
Back to the dignity thing, right?
Back to the dignity part, yeah. So validation, is it validation? Yes, in a way it's validation, because corporates will not come to you if you don't have the traction,
Yep.
if you don't have the numbers, if you don't have the viewership, if you don't have the subscribers. So in a way, yes. But what's important, Rosie and everyone, is not to be obsessed by being a corporate sellout. It's very easy once the money comes in to just be out there selling space, and just being able to present yourself as the new media agency of the new trend, which is podcasting. Just focus on the craft, the money will come. And that's what we've been doing. We've been making sure that what we develop as a brand and what we develop as a product, which is that political discussion, that very, very hard-edged but funny,
Yeah.
and sometimes even frivolous discussion that we have, is the product, and people come to us.
Did you find it difficult to attach a specific value? Or I'm guessing you had help with it, but was it difficult to attach a value?
So it was. So we're known as very unfiltered, unvarnished, raw. But, and you know, I don't necessarily want to be political, but you have to be political nowadays. This coalesced with what's happening in the world today. So with what's happening, the genocide in Gaza, a lot of people wanted to promote local brands.
Yeah.
There's a big boycott and divestment movement in the world. So a lot of brands came to us and said, look, we're a local brand. Our biggest competitor is a brand from country X. And we think that consumers don't want to buy from country X now.
Right.
Do you think you can turn yourself into a showcase for local brands? So without having to push it too much, without having to hard sell the whole thing and relating it to what's happening in Gaza, we suddenly became an emporium for local brands. And that's now our branding, our image as two guys, left politics, but still there, championing the local industry, the small guys, the SMEs in Malaysia.
So when we had we've had a few prep talks about this as well, and you've also done some podcasting things as well, and I started to laugh when we were chatting, because I said, there's still that MP in you, that you're trying to champion people, you're trying to push people, you're trying to, move things on. That it's in you, isn't it?
Yeah, once politician, always a politician.
Yeah.
But, we're selling everything from drinks, from mattresses. We had a mattress in the studio, to food stuff, to everything, really.
Yeah.
We're selling everything now. And yeah, this is a slide which I also wanted to share. I don't know how long it takes to disrupt the mainstream, but consider this. These are the 4 biggest mainstream media brands in Malaysia. They have radio, they have TV, they have outdoor advertising, they have above the line, they have digital, they have everything. But over the last 8 years, their market capitalization has dropped by 60 to 90%. The market cap has gone down by 60 to 90%. Part of it, of course, is pandemic related, but that's 8 years. That's from about 2016 till now. So what does that tell you? That tells you that things are moving on. That tells you that although they still command the lion's share of ADEX in Malaysia, and I'm sure in other countries, but that ADEX is slowly moving. It's commoditized, it's moving away from traditional media to podcasts, to digital especially, all platforms. And of course, we get a minuscule amount of that, and certainly we don't get the repeat packages that major media agencies get, but we're starting to get. And what does that tell you? That tells you that people's preferences are moving on, that it's sticky. We always talk about stickiness in podcasting. How long is it going to last? Is this just a fad? Is it just going to be here for 2 to 3 years? But I think that stickiness is starting to show.
And I think it's about seeing different types of value as well, isn't it? You don't necessarily, looking at your figures and looking at what you said about like local brands wanting to come to you, it's not necessarily, people want to advertise with everyone all the time.
Sure.
You have a very specific audience that people want to access.
Yep. So perfectly right. I mean, if you go with the mainstream, it's always on, never off. For us, it's something that people are looking forward to. and dropping it in. So I think that could be another reason why we've been having some relative success. So I don't just podcast. As I said, I hedge because I don't know who's going to win, podcasts or radio. I know I'm here for Radio Days, but I hedge as well. Yesterday I had this wonderful quote at the opening. Some guy came up here and said that if there's a band, radio is the drummer. It's that beat. It provides the beat in the background. It's always there. It makes sure that there's a beat to the song. And he said podcasts are like the saxophone, saxophonist,
right, okay.
That's just come in with a solo. You don't know how long that solo is going to last. It's there to give you a nice tune, and perhaps it's gone for the next song because you don't have saxophone solos in every single song. So I'm hedging myself. So right about the time I started the podcast, I was thrown out of politics. I got a call. I got an email. He's here. Nazri is here, my boss in radio. And he said, why don't you come and become a radio presenter, a DJ? We call it DJ in Malaysia. And I said, wow, I'd never been on radio before, although I know that there's one thing that radio DJs and politicians have in common. Do you know what that is, Rosie?
Like talking?
We love the sound of our own voice.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'll give this a go. And he wanted it to be just a lark. He just wanted to be a stunt, a gimmick, where I just come on for 1 week. And I said, look, let me just do it I don't want to just do it for 1 week. I want to do it once a week, but I want to do it for a year. And now I'm into my second year. And I've joined Hot FM. When I joined Hot FM, it wasn't number one. It's number one now. There's all the figures there. It's gone up by 75%, 139% increase in unique views on Hot FM audio and things like that. So again, I'm not saying I'm the sole reason why it's happened, but I don't know. I mean, I wanted to go into audio. I believe that the spoken word, whether it's broadcasting or podcasting, is important. And I wanted to hedge myself because I didn't know which was going to win. And it could end up existing together. Perfect coexistence between podcasting and radio.
And a lot of people do, but they are different. And what are the different things you like about them?
So it's different because different folks, different strokes, I get different market. I don't know, guys, whether I'm going to go back into politics, but if, just in case I go back into politics, I have to make sure that my brand stays out there. I stay relevant. So what I thought was, if I did a podcast, I only attract this type of listener and viewer. And we know what that is. People who are more willing to listen, people who are more willing to be interested in the long form, people who want the argument, so that's a smaller subset of audience.
Well, they have to find you.
They have to find you, and you have to keep them engaged.
Yeah.
Whereas radio is always on. It's a captive audience. It's in the morning, so I do the morning show with two guys and a lady, and we have fun. And this is my mass market. And Rosie, I tell you, when I meet someone, and this is downtown Kuala Lumpur. Somebody's seen me in the shopping center, the mall, or the supermarket or something, and they're coming to me. I know they're coming to me. They wanna talk to me. They want a selfie. They want to complain or something. But immediately in my mind, I'm trying to categorize and bucket whether they are the radio listener or the podcast listener.
And you get it right?
I get it right most of the time because I know the demographic.
Yeah.
I know that this person's the radio listener.
Yeah.
I know that this person's the podcast listener. And I'll always ask them, I said, are you here because you like the podcast or are you here because you like the radio? And again, I would say I have a 80 to 90% success of guessing why they've come up to me. And it's a completely different market. Radio's mass. I'm on radio, sorry Nazri, because one day I hope that the mass market helps me go back into politics. Yep. And I'm on podcast because I still want to be involved in the narrative and to be involved in a discussion on serious issues.
But because I know you left and you weren't 100% sure you wanted to go back to politics, but you have had to be careful about your brand, haven't you? You have had to decide who you want to be. Yeah,
I mean, like I said at the start of it, I'm still a bit careful, but I try to be a bit more unfiltered and unencumbered because I think that if I want to go back into politics, I want to have peace of mind.
Yeah.
I think politicians suffer from mental health challenges because they're not who they are. And I think that, if I have a second turn in politics, of course, observing protocol, observing what is decent in public life, but I think you have to try to approximate who you really are more than who you want to present yourself to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just got a couple more, and then we can just wrap things up. So what do I do now? Expansion. As I said, it was a side hustle. We've started a second podcast now called Kindred Stories. So if our first podcast, Keluar Sekejap, is in Malay, the Malay language, Bahasa Malaysia. This one's in English, and this one is about Muslim conversations. So we decided there was a big market out there for Muslim podcasts. I'm Muslim, and we thought, let's have a conversation with eminent Muslims around the world, especially those who found religion later on in life, about their journey, about their personal faith. We had our first episode with Sonny Bill Williams, World Cup winner, Rugby World Cup winner with New Zealand, All Black. He's a convert, revert into Islam, and he was born Christian. We've already had, I think, 300,000 views and listeners on to the first episode. So we're thinking about expansion. We've acquired 2 other podcasts now, one on football, another one on reading. And we also did something interesting, Rosie, which is a podfest.
Yeah.
So we turned podcasts into events. So we weren't content, satisfied, just doing things on the podcast. We decided to take it on the road. And we sold out our first podcast, Podfest, 35 other podcasts. We got the whole community, whole industry together. We had about 2 million collective subscribers over 2 days, much like Radiodays Europe, and we had them perform live. And we've discovered that it's something that has legs.
Yeah.
Because people want to see the live show as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, this is a whole new world to me. I started off by telling you the story of how I was cast out of my party, especially by my party leader, who didn't want to see my face anymore. And the best revenge, I tell you, is that he can't unsee me anymore. So now, not only do I have the best podcast, not only do I have the #1 breakfast radio show, I've become a key opinion leader, or what politicians dread to call influencer. I sell drinks, I sell clothes, I sell frozen lamb. So I've become, to my former party leader who wanted to kill me, I've become that great Russian courtier, Rasputin, who never wants to die. When he wants to buy a drink, I'm there. When he wants to buy clothes, I'm there. When he wants to buy his frozen lamb, he can't unsee me. Thank you very much.
Great revenge. Sorry, I just had a coffee fit then. Do we have any questions? We've got like 5 minutes left. Anyone? Yes, over there. Have we got a microphone? Yep. Yeah? Just over there, thank you, thanks.
Hello, I'm Lila. I'm from a Norwegian political show. We cover Norwegian internal politics. And I'm just wondering, what do you consider when you discuss with yourself whether to go back to the politics? Where are you most influential? I guess you want to change things still. And is it still like in the politics you can change more than being a podcast radio star?
Wow, that's a tough question, because I've done both. And I'm extremely happy where I am right now, because my mental health is so much better than when I was in politics, and my physical health as well. So if I ever decide to go back, it will be a very personal decision that I'll discuss with my family, with my wife and my children as well, because I think they are much happier with me being a podcaster than a politician. But where am I most influential? Of course, I'm not going to lie. If you are in the room deciding in parliament or in cabinet, that's really where the final decision is made. And I miss it. Of course I miss it, because there's only a certain extent to which you can go being a broadcaster or podcaster. You can move public opinion. You can move people's views, and you can raise an issue, and you can start a campaign. But at the end of the day, it's those ladies and gentlemen who are in that room and that arena that finally decide whether or not they will change something or whether they stick to the existing policy. So it's going to be a very difficult dilemma for me when I come to the point where I decide what to do. But of course, I might end up enjoying this too much and making too much money, end up listing a media company, and that might be the end of it. So, my perspective has changed in life. When I started the podcast, I'm not going to lie to you. I said, I'm going to start this. This is going to be my political platform. This is going to be my apprentice to Donald Trump of coming back into politics. Bad example. But now, I don't know. The honest answer is I don't know. It used to be a platform for me to come back, but now I'm enjoying it too much. I owe too much to my listeners who enjoy this. A lot of my listeners say to me, don't go back to politics. Just do this. So,
do you think you could do both?
No, I don't think so. So this is a great segue, Rosie. A minister tried to do a podcast. So after I started to do a podcast, a minister started his own podcast.
Right.
And he came under a lot of criticism because people simply said, ministers should not be doing podcasts. Do your work. Let your work define your success, not a podcast. So I don't think you can do both.
No.
So it's going to be a choice at the end of the day. And literally the title of my podcast is Keluar Sekejap. And that in Malay, in English, I'll translate it. It means out for just a little while. So it suggests that I'm going to come back. So I don't know.
Any other questions? Yes. Hello.
Hi, I'm Frans from the Netherlands, which may sound a bit odd, but it's my name. Thank you for the presentations. Obviously, you're very well connected to your party still, I assume, and maybe to the government. To what extent do you use inside sources in prepping for your podcast? And how do you prevent them from pushing their agenda?
So 100%. I think one advantage that we have compared to other podcasters is we have still friends inside. So when there's an issue, and I know that I'm going to come hard on something, I will call the person that I know, and I'll say that, do you want to tell me something? Because this is the position that I'm going to take. You are a friend. I still regard you as a friend. And I want to be fair to you. So I will listen to what she or he has to say, and I will obviously take that into consideration. We also get sponsors who don't appear. So, this is a trade show, so for the interest of sharing, I can share that we get sponsors from government agencies. So for one government agency, for instance, that focuses on pension saving. So they did 3 shows with us where they sponsored the shows. They didn't want to appear, but they wanted us to convey a certain narrative, which is to increase people's voluntary savings in the pension fund that we have. So we had a discussion about it, the producer, my partner, and myself, and said, is this something that benefits the public good? Because clearly there's an agenda. It's whitewashed, so they don't appear. We weave it into our conversation. So we had a conversation because we want to be ethical about this. Obviously, if we're going to whitewash something that is not in the public interest or not in the public good, we would say no. Then it has to be a visible branded sponsorship. Then people will know, okay, they're sponsoring this mattress. That's fine. It's transactional. But if we're going to do something that is subliminal, almost, and weave that thing into the story, then we have to be quite clear that we're dealing with a public institution, and it's for the public interest. So that pension was a recent example. We're still on the money for it. We have one more episode left, where we're very careful on how we present it. But on personal contacts, we are never pushed by their personal agenda. We'll say that, look, we'll give you the right of reply, so we can say that we've approached that person, and this is what their reply is. Recently, we had a topic on citizenship in Malaysia. We had a non-governmental organization in. They went and railed against the government for amendment to the constitution that's about to take place next week. We had a call from the Minister of Interior, Minister of Home Affairs. He said, look, we need a right of reply. I want to be on your show, so I'm rushing back right after this session, flying back to KL, because we have the Minister of Home Affairs on, because we need to give the right of reply. So we try to be as fair as possible.
We've run out of time.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
If we can, say thank you very much. You're going to be around, aren't you, for a little while?
Yes.
So I'm sure KJ will answer any other questions you've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, KJ. We're great to have you in podcasting, so do stick with us. If you fancy a trip to Kuala Lumpur, by the way, Radio Days Asia is the 2nd to the 4th of September 2024. 10-minute break, and then back in here, we're going to talk about what do Gen Z want from radio with Alid, the head of BBC Radio 1. Back in 10 minutes. See you then.